My boss forced a malnourished 10-year-old to work construction for $2 an hour, so I took the kid and walked out. A year later, I learned the real reason he wanted that boy, and it was darker than I ever imagined. I used to work on a construction site, and all the workers were the type to catcall and harass any woman that passed by. But one day, as I worked the night shift, I noticed someone who stood out a lot. It was a 10-year-old boy working the night shift. He was extremely skinny, his hands were covered in dirt, and there was this faraway look in his eye. As soon as he saw me walking over, he cowered in fear, like he wasn't sure what I was going to do next. So I made sure to keep my distance as I spoke in a soft voice. "Hey, where are your parents? Mommy said not to answer any questions," he immediately blurted out, with tears streaming down his face. I nodded slowly and took a dramatic deep breath as if inviting him to take one with me. He did, and afterwards I could see his body releasing some of his very built-up tension. I reassured him that I could keep a secret, and I even pinky promised that I wouldn't tell anyone. Mommy says I'm a big boy now, and big boys have to earn their place in the family. I maintained my poker face and asked how long he would be here for. Mommy says I only have to work 4 nights a week because I've been a good boy in school. My heart broke as I watched a sense of pride enter his eyes. I wanted to pick him up and bring him back to my place to show him what a real home looked like, but I couldn't, not yet. So I just let him keep working while I quietly walked over to my boss. "What the F is a kid doing here?" I asked, waiting to hear his side of the story. "Hey man, that kid's tiny hands can reach those tight spaces the rest of us can't. And I don't care if you're Sophie Rain or Mike Tyson. If someone wants to work for $2 an hour, then the job is theirs." And I guess my boss noticed my anger because he immediately threatened to fire me if I told anyone about it. Well, I was living paycheck to paycheck, and if I got fired, I would be on the verge of homelessness. But there was no way I could abandon a kid like that, so I decided to play the long game. For a while, I would bring in extra meals for him, as well as cash, so he could lie to his mom that he had worked more hours than he actually did. And I knew if he was smart enough to be a 10-year-old construction worker, then he was smart enough to keep that secret, and he did. But over the next few weeks, something shifted. He was moving a lot slower. He had developed these huge craters under his eyes, and one night, I saw his arms were covered in bruises, ones that couldn't have come from the job. That was my breaking point. I knew I had to do something. So on our break, when no one was listening, I asked if he wanted to come home with me. I expected some sort of apprehension, or at least for him to pause and think about it. But no, his face immediately lit up with a joy that I'd never seen before. "Yes!" He yelled so loudly that everyone even turned their heads to see what was going on. As soon as the shift was over, I practically threw him into my car and drove him home. Looking back, I probably should have called CPS or something, but I couldn't help myself, because between my boss, his mom, and the CPS horror stories, the last thing I wanted to do was trust a stranger with his life. As soon as I showed him his bed in the guest room, he ran in and fell asleep. He must have slept for almost 20 hours before waking up again. I jokingly asked if he enjoyed his hibernation, and his big blue eyes filled with tears. At home, if I don't fall asleep within 2 minutes, then my mom says I'm not tired enough, and I'm just being lazy, so I only get to sleep once every 3 days. I wanted to go feral right there and then, but I gathered myself and asked if he wanted anything to eat. When I gave him a plate of cooked chicken nuggets, he ate it so fast that he threw up. It was clear that something was very, very wrong. For the next few days, me and Mikey didn't speak much, because he was always either gorging on some food or fast asleep. My phone was being spammed with notifications from my boss and unknown numbers, but I didn't care, because homeless or not, I knew there was no way I could ever go back to that job. So once he had recalibrated a little, I asked him if there was any family he could stay with. "Can you take me to my daddy?" His voice was sheepish. I was hesitant because his mom seemed evil, but I trusted my judge of character and decided I would help to suss him out. Mikey gave me the address, and as soon as I rang the doorbell, his dad answered. He looked surprised when he saw me, but when he glanced over at Mikey, a smile lit up his face. He invited me inside. When Mikey went to sleep, I told him everything. The construction job, the bruises, the starvation. He buried his face in his hands. The court didn't believe me when I told them his mom was dangerous for Mikey. Maybe now they finally will. I stared down at the ground, and he asked if I wanted to work for him since I was out of a job. I took the offer, and it should have been our "and everybody clapped" moment, but it wasn't. Because the next morning, I woke up to a knock on my door. It was my ex-boss. I opened it, just wanting to get things over with, but as soon as I did, a woman I didn't recognize barged in and slapped me. "Where is my son?" she shrieked. I stumbled backward, my hand flying to my stinging cheek. The woman pushed past me into my apartment, her eyes wild and searching. My ex-boss stood in the doorway, arms crossed, looking smug. "He's not here," I managed to say, trying to keep my voice steady. My mind raced. Mikey was safe with his father, but I couldn't let her know that. Not yet. She whirled around, her face twisted with rage. "You kidnapped my son. I've already called the police. They're on their way. If you don't tell me where he is right now, you'll be arrested." My stomach dropped. This was exactly what I'd been afraid of. I held up my hands, trying to appear calm. "I didn't kidnap anyone. Mikey came with me willingly because he was scared and exhausted." "Liar!" she screamed. "My son would never leave me. You tricked him. You promised him things, didn't you? Toys, food, you sick person." I could see my ex-boss nodding along, clearly enjoying the show. The woman continued her tirade, pacing around my living room like a caged animal. "Look," I said, trying to reason with her. "Mikey was working at a construction site. At night. He's 10 years old. That's not normal." She laughed, but it was harsh and bitter. "I'm teaching him responsibility. something you clearly know nothing about, considering you abandoned your job to steal my child. I felt trapped. If the police were really coming, I needed to think fast. Fine, I said, making a split-second decision. I'll take you to him, but we need to talk about what's been happening to Mikey. Her eyes narrowed suspiciously, but she nodded. My ex-boss stepped aside as we left my apartment. I could feel him following us down to the parking lot, probably making sure I didn't try to run. During the drive to Mikey's father's house, the woman sat in my passenger seat, alternating between threats and sobs. She painted herself as a struggling single mother doing her best, claiming I'd taken advantage of her trust. When we arrived, Mikey's father opened the door, his face falling when he saw who was with me. Before anyone could speak, Mikey's mother pushed past him into the house. "Mikey!" she called out, her voice suddenly sweet and concerned. "Baby, where are you?" Mikey appeared at the top of the stairs, and his whole body tensed when he saw his mother. She rushed to him, pulling him into a tight embrace that made him wince. "Oh, my poor baby," she cooed, tears streaming down her face. "This man," she pointed at me, "he tricked you, didn't he? Promised you all sorts of things to make you leave mommy." "No," Mikey protested, trying to pull away. "He helped me. You make me work, and you don't let me sleep, and—" "Shh," she interrupted, holding him tighter. "You're confused, sweetheart. This man manipulated you." By now, the commotion had attracted attention. A few neighbors had stepped out of their houses, watching the scene unfold. Mikey's mother seemed to notice this and played it up even more. "Thank God I found him," she said loudly, addressing the growing audience. "This man took my son from his workplace where he was doing a school project. He lured him with promises of food and toys. I saw the neighbors exchanging glances, and I could see doubt creeping into their expressions as they looked at me. One woman pulled out her phone, and I had a sinking feeling she was either calling the police or recording. "That's not true," I said, but my voice sounded weak even to my own ears. "Mikey was being abused. He was working construction at night. Look at him. He's malnourished and exhausted." Mikey's mother gasped dramatically. "How dare you accuse me of abuse? I'm a single mother doing everything I can to provide for my child. You're just trying to cover up your sick intentions." Mikey's father finally found his voice. "Now wait a minute, Victoria. We both know." "Don't you start, Nathan," she snapped. "You lost custody for a reason, and now you're harboring a kidnapper?" The situation was spiraling out of control. More neighbors had gathered, and I could hear sirens in the distance. Mikey was crying now, still trying to tell the truth, but his mother kept shushing him, telling everyone he was traumatized and confused. When the police arrived, Victoria immediately ran to them, sobbing about her stolen son. I tried to explain, but with no evidence and a crowd of suspicious neighbors, it didn't look good for me. The officers separated us for questioning. I told them everything: the construction site, the bruises, the sleep deprivation, but without proof. It was my word against hers, and she was Mikey's mother. In the end, the police let me go with a warning, but Victoria filed a restraining order against me. I wasn't allowed within 500 feet of Mikey or his father's house. She'd effectively cut me off from helping either of them. The next few days were a nightmare. Victoria had taken to social media, posting dramatic stories about how a dangerous man had tried to steal her son. She didn't use my name, but enough details were there that people in our community figured it out. My phone buzzed constantly with messages, some from concerned friends asking if the stories were true, others from people I barely knew, calling me horrible names. My landlord even called, saying he'd received concerning reports about me. I lost the job Nathan had offered me before I even started. He texted me apologizing, saying Victoria was watching his every move now, and he couldn't risk giving her more ammunition. I felt completely alone. Every time I went to the grocery store, I felt eyes on me. Whispers followed me everywhere. One day, a woman pulled her child closer when I walked by, and I wanted to scream that I was trying to help a child, not hurt one, but I couldn't give up on Mikey. I knew what I'd seen. Those bruises, that exhaustion, the fear in his eyes. It was all real. I tried to reach out to Nathan through a mutual acquaintance, but Victoria had anticipated that. She'd spread her poison there too, telling anyone who'd listen that I was obsessed with her son and trying to manipulate the father. The mutual friend awkwardly told me it would be better if I stayed away for everyone's sake. Days turned into weeks. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat properly. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mikey's bruised arms and exhausted face. The guilt of leaving him in that situation was eating me alive. I'd saved up some money from my construction job, but it was running out fast without new employment. No one wanted to hire the guy accused of trying to kidnap a child. One evening, about 3 weeks after the incident, I was walking home from another failed job interview when I saw them. Victoria was dragging Mikey out of a grocery store, her grip on his wrist so tight I could see him wincing from across the parking lot. She was hissing something at him, her face contorted with anger. Mikey was trying to keep up, stumbling as she yanked him along. My heart pounded. This was it, proof of her treatment. I pulled out my phone, trying to look casual as I started recording. Victoria was so focused on berating Mikey that she didn't notice me. I caught her jerking his arm hard enough to make him cry out, heard her threatening him about embarrassing her in public. I had it. Finally, Finally, I had evidence. But as I turned to leave, someone grabbed my shoulder. It was Victoria's friend from the store, a woman I'd seen in her social media posts. "I saw what you're doing," she said loudly. "Victoria, this creep is filming your son." Victoria's head snapped up, her eyes locking onto mine with pure hatred. She released Mikey and stormed toward me, her friend close behind. "Give me that phone," she demanded, her voice low and dangerous. "No," I said, backing away. "I have evidence of what you're doing to him." "Evidence of what? Me disciplining my child? You're stalking us." She turned to her friend. "Call the police. Tell them the man with the restraining order is here harassing us." I ran. I'm not proud of it, but I ran. I could hear her screaming behind me, playing the victim for anyone within earshot. I made it to my apartment and locked the door, my hands shaking as I tried to save the video to multiple places. But I'd only gotten home 10 minutes before there was pounding on my door. Not the police. Victoria herself, with two large men I didn't recognize. "Open up," she screamed. "I know you're in there. Give me that phone or these nice gentlemen will make sure you do." I stayed silent, hoping she'd leave. But then I heard something that made my blood run cold. The sound of keys jingling. My landlord's voice came through the door. "Ma'am, I really shouldn't. This man is dangerous," Victoria interrupted. "He's been stalking my son. We just need to get the illegal recordings he made of my child. You don't want a predator in your building, do you?" The lock turned. They were coming in. I grabbed my phone and ran to the bathroom, trying to upload the video somewhere, anywhere, but my hands were shaking too badly, and before I could finish, they were in my apartment. Victoria burst into the bathroom, her face triumphant. "Give it to me." "No," I said, holding the phone tight. "People need to see what you're doing to Mikey." She nodded to one of the men, who grabbed my wrist and twisted. I cried out, and the phone fell from my hand. Victoria snatched it up and, without hesitation, smashed it against the tile floor. Once, twice, 3 times, until it was nothing but broken glass and twisted metal. "There," she said, breathing hard. "Now you have nothing, and if you come near my son again, these men will make sure you regret it. Understand?" I nodded, defeated. They left, and I sank to the bathroom floor, staring at the destroyed phone. My evidence was gone. Mikey was still trapped, and I was more powerless than ever. The next day, my landlord gave me an eviction notice. 30 days to get out. Victoria's campaign against me had worked perfectly. I spent the next week in a haze of desperation. I tried reaching out to child services anonymously, but without specific evidence or my name attached, they said they couldn't investigate based on hearsay. I even drove by Nathan's house once, hoping to catch him alone, but Victoria's car was always there, watching. Then, unexpectedly, I got a text from an unknown number. "Meet me at the coffee shop on 5th Street. Come alone. N. Nathan." It had to be. I arrived early, paranoid that it might be a trap, but sure enough, Nathan walked in, looking haggard and constantly checking over his shoulder. "I'm sorry about everything," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. She's worse than ever. She won't let Mikey out of her sight except for school. She even pulled him from the construction site after you took him." "That's good, at least," I said. Nathan shook his head. "She just found other ways to punish him. Less food, less sleep. She's convinced he's going to run away again." He pulled out his phone, showing me a picture that made me gasp. Mikey looked even thinner than before, his eyes hollow and defeated. "We need to do something," I said. "I know. That's why I'm here." Nathan leaned forward. "I've been documenting everything I can when I have visitation. Photos, videos, audio recordings. But Victoria's smart. She always has an explanation. Mikey's thin because he's a picky eater. He's tired because he stays up reading. The bruises are from playing too rough at school. So what do? I need more evidence. Medical evidence. I'm going to take Mikey to a doctor during my next visitation, get him properly examined. But Victoria will know something's up if I do it openly." He paused. "I need you to help me create a distraction." It was risky. If Victoria caught on, she'd make things even worse for Mikey. But what choice did we have? We planned carefully. During Nathan's next visitation, I would show up at a public place where Victoria would see me. While she was distracted dealing with me, Nathan would take Mikey to a walk-in clinic across town. The day came. I positioned myself at the park where Nathan was supposed to pick up Mikey. As expected, Victoria was there, hovering as always. When she saw me, her face went red with rage. "You!" she screamed, rushing toward me. "I'm calling the police right now!" I stayed just outside the restraining order distance, hands up. "I'm not breaking any laws. This is a public park." She was so focused on me, pulling out her phone and shouting threats, that she didn't notice Nathan quietly leading Mikey to his car. Other parents were staring, some recording the scene. Victoria was putting on quite a show, playing the terrified mother perfectly. I stood my ground for 20 minutes, letting her rant and rave, before finally walking away. She followed for a bit, still on the phone with what I assumed was the police, but eventually gave up. An hour later, Nathan texted me. "Got it. Doctor documented everything. Malnutrition, old bruises, signs of sleep deprivation. It's all official now." Finally, we had real evidence. But Victoria was smarter than we gave her credit for. When Nathan didn't return Mikey at the agreed time, she knew something was wrong. By the time he brought Mikey back, she'd already started spinning her story. The next day, Nathan got a call from Child Services. Victoria had reported him for medical neglect, claiming he'd failed to take Mikey to the doctor for months and was now trying to cover it up by getting emergency care during his visitation. She'd even produced fake documentation showing she'd been asking him to take Mikey to appointments that he'd allegedly refused. "She's saying the malnutrition and exhaustion happened under my care," Nathan told me over the phone, his voice breaking. "She's claiming I starved him during visitations and kept him up all night. The bruises? She says I did that too." The custody hearing was expedited. Victoria had played the system perfectly, making it seem like Nathan and I were working together together to frame her. She'd kept just enough documentation to make her lies believable, while we looked like conspirators. I wasn't allowed in the courtroom, but Nathan told me how it went. Victoria had cried on the stand, talking about how hard it was to be a single mother, how Nathan had always been jealous of her bond with Mikey, how he'd recruited a disturbed stranger to help him steal her son. She even suggested that I had inappropriate intentions toward Mikey, which made me sick to my stomach. The judge was sympathetic to her. Without more concrete evidence of her abuse happening in her home, the medical documentation could be explained away by her version of events. Nathan's visitation was suspended pending further investigation. Mikey was trapped with her again, and now she had complete control. I was at my lowest point. In 2 weeks, I'd be homeless. Mikey was suffering more than ever. Victoria had won at every turn. I'd failed him completely. But then something unexpected happened. I got a call from someone I'd never met, a woman named Sarah who said she lived in Victoria's apartment complex. "I've been watching what's been happening," she said. "I know you've been trying to help that little boy. I've seen things too, heard things through the walls. That woman is evil." Sarah had been documenting Victoria's behavior for months, disturbed by what she witnessed. Screaming matches late at night, the sound of things being thrown, Mikey's cries. She'd tried calling CPS herself, but had been dismissed. "But together," she said, "maybe they'll listen." We met at a diner outside of town. Sarah showed me videos she'd taken from her window. Victoria dragging Mikey inside by his hair, throwing what looked like his schoolwork off the balcony in a rage, leaving him locked on the balcony in the cold while she entertained friends inside. "This is it," I said. "This is what we need." But we had to be strategic. Victoria had already painted me as a stalker and Nathan as an abusive father. If we came forward wrong, she'd dismiss Sarah as another conspirator. We decided Sarah would go to CPS alone, presenting herself as a concerned neighbor with no connection to me or Nathan. She'd submit everything anonymously at first, forcing an investigation without Victoria being able to prepare her lies. While that was happening, I had one last card to play. I reached out to my old co-workers from the construction site. Most wanted nothing to do with me, but a few remembered Mikey. They remembered how small he was, how tired, how scared. 2 of them agreed to give statements about seeing a child working night shifts. It wasn't much, but it was something. The investigation started slowly. CPS showed up at Victoria's apartment, but she was ready with explanations for everything. Mikey was naturally thin. He had behavioral issues that required strict discipline. The videos Sarah had taken were misinterpreted. She was just a firm parent dealing with a difficult child. But then more neighbors came forward. Inspired by Sarah's courage, they shared their own observations. The teacher at Mikey's school reported concerns about him falling asleep in class and flinching when adults approached. The pattern was becoming harder to ignore. Victoria knew the walls were closing in. She started making mistakes, getting sloppy. She showed up at Nathan's work, causing a scene, accusing him of orchestrating a conspiracy against her. She posted increasingly unhinged rants on social media about being persecuted for being a strong, single mother. Then came the day that changed everything. I was packing up my apartment, preparing for homelessness, when Nathan called. "She's lost it," he said. "She's at my place right now, screaming at me through the door. I think she knows she's going to lose Mikey. I'm recording everything, but I'm scared of what she might do." "Call the police," I said. "I did. They're on the way. But wait, she's leaving. She's getting in her car. Oh God, Mikey's with her." My blood ran cold. "Where is she going?" "I don't know. She's driving erratically. I'm following her." "Nathan, be careful. She's heading toward your neighborhood." "Why would she?" "Oh no, she knows you're involved. She's coming for you." I looked out my window and saw Victoria's car screech into the parking lot. She got out, dragging Mikey with her. Even from my second-floor window, I could see the fury in her eyes. "She's here," I told Nathan. "Call 911 again. Tell them she's violating the restraining order." Victoria started pounding on the building's door, screaming my name. Other residents were coming out of their apartments, alarmed by the noise. Mikey was crying, trying to pull away from her, but she held him tight. I made a decision. If she was going to make a scene, I was going to make sure everyone saw who she really was. I went downstairs and opened the building door, staying inside so I wasn't technically violating the restraining order. Victoria lunged forward, but I stepped back. "You ruined everything!" she screamed. "You turned everyone against me! You poisoned my son's mind!" "I just told the truth," I said calmly, aware that multiple neighbors were now recording on their phones. "The truth? The truth is you're obsessed with my son. You're sick. Tell them, Mikey. Tell them how this man tried to take you." Mikey looked at me, then at his mother, then at all the watching neighbors, and in a small but clear voice he said, "No, Mommy, you're lying. He helped me. You're the one who hurts me." The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria's face went from red to white. She raised her hand, and for a moment I thought she was going to hit Mikey right there in front of everyone. But then the police sirens filled the air. Nathan's car pulled up right behind the police cruisers. Officers got out, assessing the situation. "This man is violating a restraining order," Victoria immediately claimed, pointing at me. "Ma'am, he's inside the building. You're the one who came here," one officer noted. "And we've had multiple calls about a disturbance you're causing." As they questioned her, Victoria's composure finally cracked completely. She started ranting about conspiracies, about everyone being against her, about how Mikey was her property and she could raise him however she wanted. The officers exchanged glances as she essentially confessed to treating her son like an object rather than a person. One of the neighbors stepped forward, an elderly woman I'd seen around but never spoken to. "Officers, I've been recording this whole interaction. This woman just threatened to hit hit her child in front of all of us, and the boy himself just said she hurts him. More neighbors spoke up, sharing what they'd witnessed over the months. Victoria tried to grab Mikey and leave, but the officers stopped her. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to come with us for questioning," one said, "and the boy will need to be placed in protective custody while this is sorted out." "No!" Victoria screamed. "You can't take him! He's mine!" As they led her away in handcuffs, still screaming, Mikey ran to his father. Nathan held him tight, both of them crying. I stayed in the doorway, relief washing over me, as I watched the police car drive away with Victoria inside. It wasn't over. There would be investigations, court hearings, and who knows what else. But for the first time since this all started, Mikey was safe. The truth was finally out. The neighbors dispersed slowly, many nodding at me with newfound respect. The elderly woman who'd spoken up patted my arm as she passed. "You did a good thing, young man," she said. "Not many people would have fought so hard for a child that wasn't theirs." Nathan approached with Mikey, who was clinging to his father, but looking at me with those big blue eyes. Still tired, still too thin, but for the first time, hopeful. "Thank you," Nathan said simply, "for everything." "Can I visit you and Daddy?" Mikey asked me quietly. I knelt down to his level. "Of course, buddy. Anytime you want." As they walked away together, I realized that despite everything, losing my job, my reputation, almost my home, it had all been worth it. Mikey was safe. That's all that mattered. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal procedures. Victoria was charged with child endangerment and violating a restraining order. The CPS investigation, bolstered by the video evidence from multiple sources and witness testimonies, confirmed the abuse. Nathan was granted emergency temporary custody while the courts sorted everything out. My reputation slowly recovered as the truth spread through the community. The construction workers who'd given statements about Mikey working at the site helped clear my name. Even my old boss faced consequences for employing a child, though he tried to claim he didn't know Mikey's real age. I found a new job at a local hardware store. Nothing fancy, but honest work with people who respected what I'd done. My landlord, feeling guilty about letting Victoria into my apartment, rescinded the eviction notice, but the relief was short-lived. 3 days after Victoria's arrest, she was released on bail. Nathan called me in a panic. She'd shown up at Mikey's school, trying to convince the staff she was just there to drop off his forgotten lunch. The school had turned her away, but it was clear she wasn't going to give up. Nathan decided to keep Mikey home from school for a few days while they figured out next steps. I offered to help watch him during the day since Nathan still had to work. It was risky with the restraining order still technically in place against me, but Nathan said he'd take full responsibility if anyone asked. Those few days with Mikey were eye-opening. He'd jump at every car door slamming outside. He'd ask permission to use the bathroom, to get a glass of water, to sit on the couch. When I made him a sandwich for lunch, he ate it so slowly and carefully, like he was afraid someone would take it away. On the third day, while Mikey was napping on the couch, there was a knock at Nathan's door. Through the peephole, I saw Victoria standing there with a man in a suit. Her lawyer, I guessed. I woke Mikey gently and told him to go hide in his room. Then I called Nathan and the police while Victoria continued knocking, her voice syrupy sweet as she called out that she just wanted to talk to her son. By the time the police arrived, Victoria and her lawyer were gone, but they'd left something behind. Legal papers taped to the door. Nathan was being sued for defamation and emotional distress. Victoria was claiming he'd orchestrated a campaign to destroy her reputation and steal her child. The next few weeks were a nightmare of legal maneuvering. Victoria's lawyer was good, really good. He painted her as a victim of a vindictive ex-husband who'd recruited a disturbed stranger to help kidnap her child. The restraining order against me was used as evidence of my dangerous obsession with Mikey. Sarah, the neighbor who'd been documenting Victoria's abuse, started getting threatening phone calls. Someone keyed her car. She found a note under her door warning her to mind her own business. She was scared, but she didn't back down. Then Victoria made her biggest mistake yet. She decided to confront Sarah directly. I was at the hardware store when I got the call from Sarah. She was whispering, barely audible. Victoria was outside her apartment, pounding on the door, screaming accusations. Sarah was recording everything on her phone. I told her to stay inside and keep recording while I called 911. Then I rushed over, arriving just as the police did. Victoria was in full meltdown mode, kicking Sarah's door and screaming about how everyone was conspiring against her. The police tried to calm her down, but she turned on them, accusing them of being part of the conspiracy. When one officer tried to gently guide her away from the door, she shoved him. That was all they needed. She was arrested again, this time for assaulting an officer and criminal harassment. Sarah's recordings from that day were damning. Victoria could be heard clearly threatening her, saying she'd make her pay for interfering. She'd admitted to the phone calls and the car keying. She'd even mentioned specific details about the videos Sarah had taken, essentially confirming their accuracy. With Victoria back in custody and new charges filed, things started moving quickly. The judge in the custody case expedited the hearing. Nathan's lawyer submitted all the evidence, the medical reports, the witness statements, the videos, and now Victoria's own admissions caught on tape. I was called to testify. As I walked into the courtroom, I saw Victoria at the defendant's table. She looked smaller somehow, her perfect facade cracked. When our eyes met, I saw pure hatred there, but also something else, fear. She knew she was losing. I told my story from the beginning, the construction site, Mikey's bruises, the night I took him home. I kept my voice steady and stuck to the facts. Victoria's lawyer tried to paint me as a predator, but I had an answer for every accusation. accusation. Why didn't I call CPS immediately? Because I'd heard horror stories and wanted to make sure Mikey was safe first. Why did I take him to his father instead of the authorities? Because a child asking for his daddy seemed like the most natural thing in the world. Mikey had to testify too, which broke my heart. They did it via closed-circuit TV so he wouldn't have to face his mother directly. His small voice was clear as he described the construction work, the sleep deprivation, the punishments. When asked if he wanted to live with his mother or father, he didn't hesitate. "Daddy," he said, "and can the man who saved me visit sometimes?" The judge's decision was swift and decisive. Full custody to Nathan. Victoria's parental rights weren't terminated, but she would only get supervised visitation once she completed parenting classes and therapy. The restraining orders against me were dropped. Victoria lost it in the courtroom, screaming that we'd stolen her baby, that she'd never stop fighting. As court officers escorted her out, she looked back at me with such venom that I actually took a step back. For a few weeks after the ruling, things were quiet. Nathan and Mikey started building a real life together. I visited often, helping Mikey with homework or just playing video games. He was gaining weight, sleeping through the night, actually acting like a kid. Then one evening, Nathan called me, his voice tense. Victoria had been spotted parked outside Mikey's school again. She wasn't technically violating any orders since she stayed in her car, but it was unsettling. The next day, she was at the grocery store when Nathan was shopping, always watching from a distance, always just within the law. We documented everything, but the police said there was nothing they could do unless she actually approached them. Nathan installed security cameras. I started varying my routes to and from work, paranoid that she might be following me too. The breaking point came 3 weeks later. I was closing up at the hardware store when I heard a noise in the back alley. When I went to check, Victoria was there, standing by my car. She'd slashed all 4 tires. "You destroyed my life," she said, her voice eerily calm. "You took everything from me." I pulled out my phone to call the police, but she didn't run. She just stood there, waiting. When the officers arrived, she went quietly. It was like she wanted to be caught. At her hearing, something unexpected happened. Victoria's own mother showed up. I'd never seen her before. A small, tired-looking woman who seemed to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders. She asked to speak to the judge. What she revealed explained so much. Victoria had been abused as a child, forced to work to earn her keep in the family. She'd sworn she'd never be like her own mother, but somewhere along the way, she'd become exactly that. The grandmother broke down crying, saying she should have intervened sooner, should have gotten Victoria help years ago. It didn't excuse what Victoria had done, but it added a layer of tragedy to the whole situation. The judge ordered a psychological evaluation. Victoria was diagnosed with several disorders stemming from her own childhood trauma. She was sentenced to probation with mandatory therapy. Nathan and I talked about whether to let Mikey know about his mother's past. In the end, we decided to wait until he was older. For now, he needed to focus on healing from his own trauma, not understanding hers. The months that followed were mostly peaceful. Victoria stuck to her court-ordered therapy and supervised visits. She seemed different during those visits, subdued, almost broken. Mikey was cautious around her, but willing to try rebuilding some kind of relationship. I found my own place eventually, a small apartment not far from Nathan and Mikey. My reputation in the community had completely turned around. People who'd once whispered about me now nodded respectfully. The elderly woman from my building even brought me cookies one day, thanking me again for standing up for Mikey. Sarah and I became friends, bonding over our shared experience. She told me that watching everything unfold had inspired her to go back to school to become a social worker. She wanted to help kids like Mikey. My old boss's construction company was shut down after an investigation revealed multiple labor violations beyond just Mikey's situation. I heard he tried to start up again in another town, but word had spread. Last I heard, he was working as a cashier somewhere. About a year after everything settled, Nathan invited me over for dinner. It was Mikey's 12th birthday. He'd grown so much, not just physically, but emotionally. He was confident now, quick to laugh, comfortable in his own skin. As we sat around the table, Mikey suddenly got serious. "I want to thank you," he said, looking at me. "Not just for saving me, but for showing me that there are good people in the world, people who help even when it's hard." I had to blink back tears. Nathan raised his glass in a toast. "To doing the right thing," he said, "even when it costs everything." Later that night, as I was leaving, Mikey hugged me tight. "You know you're like family now, right?" he said, "like an uncle or something." "Yeah, buddy," I said, ruffling his hair. "I know." As I drove home, I thought about how different my life had become. I'd lost a job, almost lost my home, had my reputation dragged through the mud, but I'd gained something so much more valuable, a family I'd never expected, and the knowledge that when it mattered most, I'd stood up for what was right. Victoria still sends Mikey birthday cards and Christmas presents. She's working as a receptionist now, living in a small apartment across town. Sometimes I see her at the grocery store. We don't speak, but she doesn't glare anymore, just nods and moves on. Mikey's in high school now, getting straight A's and playing soccer. He wants to be a teacher, he says, to help kids who might be struggling like he was. Nathan remarried last year, a wonderful woman who treats Mikey like her own son. And me? I'm still at the hardware store, but I'm the manager now. I volunteer with a local organization that helps identify and prevent child abuse. I share my story sometimes, hoping it might inspire others to speak up when they see something wrong, because that's what it all comes down to, really. One person deciding that a child's safety is worth more than their own comfort. One person refusing to look away. One person willing to play the long game to save a kid who couldn't save himself. Mikey still has my number saved in his his phone, not under my name, but under hero. I told him that's ridiculous, that I just did what anyone would do, but he shook his head and said, "No, you did what everyone should do. There's a difference." And maybe he's right. Maybe being a hero isn't about grand gestures or dramatic rescues. Maybe it's just about seeing a scared, exhausted kid and deciding that his life matters more than your job. Maybe it's about keeping a promise, even when everything goes wrong. Maybe it's about refusing to give up, even when the whole world seems against you. Whatever it is, I'm just glad I was there that night at the construction site. Glad I noticed. Glad I acted. Because Mikey's alive, he's safe, and he's loved. And really, that's all that matters.